I'm your host, Carolyn Solo, LCSW, EMDR therapist, and mom of 3 daughters. Thank you for joining me. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Future Template Parent Podcast. This is episode 22, and I'm really excited to invite a good friend of mine and colleague for my second interview. And I'm going to let him introduce himself, but I'm really excited to have him here today, and I think you guys will gain a lot of value from what he has to share. So Brent, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Brent Gairy. I am an agency owner of Eflat. I've been doing web design and branding for about 20 years, which sounds like it's a really long time.
But we're so old
now. I know. But what I think I just have like a passion for working with specialists. First it was music, music industry. And then now it's kind of evolved into more like nonprofits and working with healthcare specialists. And I think that's where the therapy side kind of evolved naturally from from referrals. And I've really gotten a lot of benefit from working with therapists and understanding. So that's where we are today. And just when I say Eflat, it's not just me; it's a team of 8 people. So I'm a co-owner. I'm on the project management side, and my partner, Renzo Montrose, he's creative director. So, we kind of have like that left side, right side, approach to working on projects. So,
Yeah. And I will just say that I worked with Brent and Ren for about, 3 years, maybe?
3 years, yeah.
I mean, we're still working together, I would say, but we had, and they have done so much to help me in so many ways. And also, I just think your aesthetics are so beautiful. You guys just do such a beautiful job with all the work you do. So,
well, thank you. And we really appreciate that, and I think what we also want to, as we're growing, not just for the visuals, but also from like the business side of, making sure that we're understanding the needs, that therapists have, especially those who may be thinking about, EMDR intensives and, like working with yourself and just understanding like the rationale, help us understand the messaging has to adapt, from EMDR to intensives, etc.
Right. And I mean, let's talk a little bit about the work that we did together. So I remember the first time we met was actually my sister-in-law is a very good friend of your wife.
Yes. It's kind of convoluted.
Yeah. And you actually did my sister-in-law's website.
Right.
And I was looking and I looked at hers and thought it looked great. And she gave me your name and that's how we connected. And you designed my first therapy website way back in the day.
When you were Carolyn Solo.
Yeah, when I was just Carolyn Solo Therapy. Yep.
Right.
And then about a year later, I decided that I really wanted to rebrand and reached out to you guys. And we basically completely overhauled the website entirely. Like everything about it was different. And then I also added another therapist. So it became like a small group practice.
Right.
And you guys just really took the general ideas and copy that I had and then created this beautiful, I feel like it's my practice's like business card, but way better than that. It looks so professional. And I get so many comments about how beautiful our website is all the time.
Well, thank you. And, it's funny because, you're, the type of client that I think we work best with. You have an initial idea, you have a vision, and you're open to exploring what that vision could look like. And I think what we do at Eflat is help our clients visualize their business opportunities. So, I think initially, you were kind of solo. So we did branding for you as an individual. And then, as your business began to evolve and grow, we started to think about, well, maybe we need to kind of throw out some of what got you here, but it's not going to take you forward. So like your branding from Integritas, it's a different, it was adjacent to you as Carolyn Solo as a practitioner. So we kept a lot of the continuity in terms of the visuals and the typography. So there was a familiarity between the two, but Integritas had to be its own thing to grow beyond just one person. So I think that worked out really well. And then from there, as you kind of did a little bit of a pivot into the intensives, well, then we're going to keep and we had a lot of discussions about, is it one brand? Is it a separate brand? How do you treat it? So yeah, there's definitely a lot of, I think, deeper thinking beyond just to make it look good.
Right. Like, what are the colors and the fonts and all that
which are important,
yes,
definitely important. But I think when people say branding, they kind of leave it at colors, maybe fonts, but then, there's things of tone of voice, positioning. And I think one thing Future Template Parent does really well is that it's positioned itself in its own niche compared to a lot of other practitioners where, it avoids commodification.
Right. And so right, we also worked a lot in the past year on building this new brand, Future Template Parent, which was the podcast, and then now has become like the business coaching. And you guys helped me with like all these, basically, what's the word I'm looking for? Like with my freebies and all those things, like you made them on brand. Yeah, what's the technical word? Yeah. And then you did a beautiful job with helping me come up with all these Instagram templates for the podcast and just to make everything look really, really unified. And that felt so good to me because now I have those and I can use them.
And we have a few more actually for you.
Yes, I know. I have to.
Yeah. Well, no, some new design. Yeah.
Oh, boy. Oh, that is exciting. Oh, that's very exciting. Yeah. And it just was a real load off my mind to know that I didn't have to create that, right? That wasn't something, because I think one of the things for therapists, whether they're worried about thinking about branding their practice or moving it to other things, is they know what they're good at and they don't want to spend a lot of time doing the things that they're not good at and have to teach themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And, I'm one of those people, I love learning and doing tutorials. I tell my wife that my favorite school is the University of YouTube, because if I don't know something, I'm just going to sit down and watch a video and do it. But most people, they don't have the time, it's not your passion, and, focus on what you do best, which is, if you can see more patients or, or have deeper connections with your patients because you're not worried about updating your website or, fixing a server and all of that, my team loves to do that. So it just makes sense. And I think it's when you have alignment between a client and a vendor, it becomes like a partnership. And that's what we really want to do. It's like, we understand we're working, for you. But it's like, there's certain things that we're going to bring expertise wise that could help amplify what you're doing and what you're messaging.
Right. Definitely. And that's exactly what I felt like you guys did. And I had ideas like, and the logos that you come up with are so clean but they're like distinct and everything just feels aligned. And that's really great because it's stuff that I wouldn't really think about too much because I don't even know the questions to ask,
Right. And I'll say this, logos for the longest time were the hardest thing to design.
Really?
Yeah. By far. I mean, we could build 100-page website and it would be easier in terms of like the mental strain than doing a logo, because a lot of times it was like hit or miss at first. Like we do one logo and it would knock it out the park, and then you do another logo and people hated it. And then we really over time learned that there's actually like a bit of a process to doing a logo. And it really starts from, because I think the thing about a logo is that the person who wants it has a vision in your mind, but it can't really express it because a logo has to be recognizable yet simple. It has to be something that could fit in a tiny space or a big billboard. And it's a really complex design challenge. Yeah. So, with our process now, we start to kind of get a sense of what is your taste like. And once you understand your aesthetics and your sensibilities, coming up with the concepts becomes a lot easier because the thing that you're seeing on the screen is closer to that fuzzy idea you have in your head. And then, once you have the logo, that's like the keystone, because you can build anything around the logo. And that's one reason why we don't like doing templates too much, because when we do custom work from branding, we have gone through that process of getting to know you. We've done like the homework. We understand your sensibilities, and then from there, it's really sky's the limit after that one.
Yeah. I remember you guys giving me that questionnaire to fill out when you were figuring out the logo, and I was really struck by how like specific it was.
Oh yeah.
Which was awesome, but it was like things that I wouldn't have even have thought, were important. But then once I filled it out, you like the logo that you came up with, I think you showed me 4. And I was like, oh, that's the one right there. Like immediately you had hit on one that was perfect.
And that came about because we had a client, it ended up turning out really well for them, but we must have gone through like 50 variations. And because we didn't really, it just kind of felt like we were guessing at what we thought was cool or what were they like. And then that lesson kind of taught us like break it down into what are you looking, what are your sensibilities? And now, like I said, we have that process and it's been very smooth.
Yeah, no, I loved that. I thought that was really cool how you really used that to hone in on exactly what I wanted. And then, you came back with 4, and there was one of them that I was like, oh, this is clearly the one that I want. And it was that fast. Right. So it paid off for me to do the homework so you guys could do what you do well.
I will say this though, the success of our clients, I think, is proportional to how seriously they take some of those activities, whether it might be a branding questionnaire, or I would say even if you have come through with maybe like an RFP or request for proposal, it could just be like a one sheet that you've kind of thought through certain things. It helps us then be able to like build on it versus we're guessing and then that's not what I want. And that's where the frustration factor kind of
right. And it's so much wasted time on both sides, right? Wasted energy on your part. And then of course the client is like, I don't want to go through this again.
Right. And I tell people, the quicker that we get the work done is the quicker that you can get it out into the market. You can start to see results. You can get the benefit, and hopefully, keep coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you think about working with therapists, and I know that I was like one of the first therapists you guys had worked with, right? What do you like about working with therapists? What do you feel like you can offer a therapist?
So I think, first I'll say this. A lot of my desire from working with you initially was because I went through a process of looking for a therapist, and I went to Psychology Today, and it's like a wasteland of just lots of like profiles, and there's like no picture. It's just kind of like cookie cutter. And I get, like everyone is on those kinds of platforms, but I had a hard time really understanding personalities.
Yeah.
Right? So, and I think because, you came from a referral, so there was already like some familiarity, with like your brother and such. I was like, okay, you know what, like let's kind of dive into it. So to get to the point about working with therapists, like my therapist changed the trajectory of my life. Oh. So for me, it was, okay, this person has such a big impact, but then I didn't have the courage to tell her like your website kind of sucks. Just from not even if just kind of the aesthetics of it though, like your website didn't capture what you were doing for me as a patient. And I think that was such a disservice. And I think there's almost like a moral obligation for people that are caregivers, people doing like a noble cause, to really have to be no ambiguity about what it is that you do, but also what kinds of benefits you can receive as a patient. So I think that's really where we're trying to go and work with therapists. It's like, let's amplify your message.
That is such a thank you for sharing that story, because I think it really speaks to something that a lot of therapists have experienced of like, how do I make myself stand out? Right? You're on Psychology Today. There's a billion profiles. It's like the worst internet dating site you can imagine, kind of thing.
Well, the funny thing about that is you wouldn't tolerate that on a dating website.
Right. It wouldn't be that bad.
Right. It wouldn't be that bad. So, and I'm like, so then why can't the people doing the dopest things have nice things as well?
Yes. Instead of this expectation. And I think that you're speaking to like a problem that a lot of therapists have when they think about marketing is, one, and I've talked about this a lot, therapists don't charge enough. So they often they don't think they have the disposable income to invest in something like that. Okay. And two, I think a lot of therapists believe like, well, that doesn't matter, right? Like what matters is what I do. It doesn't matter, my website doesn't, and that's just not true anymore. Like we don't live in that world anymore where your website doesn't matter,
Oh yeah, right. And and I say this. So social media, is great for awareness of
Mm-hmm.
being found,
Yep.
but websites, that's the tool that's what closes business.
Yes,
You
100%.
know, and so treating a website as just like as a maybe a billboard or brochure does it a disservice because there's a lot of research, there's a lot of transactions that can happen on the website,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll say this: most people who are looking for any sort of service
Yep.
are shopping, window shopping.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be
Mm-hmm.
browsing around. It could be 5 therapist websites or
Yeah.
20, and it could just be as simple as, especially in a field like EMDR, where it's already rather small.
Mm-hmm.
If you have one website that has it's welcoming, it's very clear in terms of, hey, it speaks to me. If it speaks to me as a person,
Mm-hmm.
then whether it's good or bad, at least it's been an impression.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just have a generic website,
Yep.
then it's forgettable.
Or if you have a website, like, so I will, of course, not name names, but I know
Mhm.
a EMDR therapist in my general area who's very well established. She's been around forever, so she doesn't, I guess, need to have a good website. Her website is headache inducing. It's
Mm.
like so much type, all different size that you would just like die if you saw it. And the reason this person can get away with it is because she's been in the field for 40 years. Like she
Right.
doesn't really need a good website. Her reputation precedes her, but that's not the majority of us. And also she still needs a new website, but
Oh
I
yeah.
think, but
Well, I will
like,
say this.
yeah,
To your point, I was
if I
listening to
didn't
a
know her,
podcast.
I would never trust that person based on her website.
Exactly. I was watching a video podcast with Gary Vaynerchuk. He's a big social media guru, and he's talking about social media 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking to a room of realtors about social media and having a website. And a lot of us saying, well, I don't need a website. Like I'm closing tons of deals. But then a woman had mentioned that there was a new realtor, young person, early 20s, to sort of take a lot of business away from them, and they couldn't figure out why.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out social media, web presence, and what happened was that they still had the market of older clients, but younger people, like those first time buyers, weren't going to her
Of
company.
course.
They're going to that, because that's what the audience is. So
Mm-hmm.
to your point, even if you have, you're successful and things are great, you know, it's always, kind of reinventing yourself for like that next generation of
Yeah.
people that need therapy.
And I think when you have a social media presence and a website presence that is really, really on brand and looks really good, it says something about who you are as a business owner. Like, I believe in providing a high quality experience for my clients. And that starts with how your website looks.
Right.
Like, if someone's website looks trashy, I expect their office to look kind of trashy. I
Oh yeah,
expect their
exactly.
payment process to be old fashioned, right? Like, even if that's not true, those are the assumptions I make based on how the first place I encounter them looks, which is their website.
Right. I mean, it's the same. Like in a website and social media, it's like your digital storefront.
Mm-hmm.
If you were going to a restaurant, I've gone to restaurants that had good ratings, but maybe it was just kind of empty. I'm like, well, I don't want to eat at an empty restaurant,
Right.
or maybe it's a little bit dingy. It just really says, like, if it's going to be dingy, like on the outside,
Yeah,
match what's in the back of the kitchen where they're making
exactly.
the food. So yeah,
Exactly.
totally agree with you.
And there's competition out there for everything now.
Mhm.
And you have to stay relevant, like you were saying about that realtor, right? Like, maybe they had a great reputation, but they weren't staying relevant. And that
Right.
matters, you know?
Exactly. Right. Especially if you're doing like, maybe a pivot into EMDR intensives,
Mm-hmm.
because maybe you see, okay, like the market is really starting to move.
Yep.
Well, if what you were doing before worked, but now that you have a hard time articulating, how intensives can change your practice and also, the lives of your patients, it's not going to work.
Right.
That you might think, well, oh, this EMDR is a fad.
Yeah. And there are people out there who still think that. Yeah. Hopefully nobody listening to this. But, yeah. But that's one of the things I thought was really great about how you worked with me is I could tell you did so much research on your own about EMDR. Like, I feel like you deserve like a honorary certificate or something.
Can I get one? I would love to put it right next to my NYU certificate.
Because you've learned so much about it, I think.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think so that comes from my background as a consultant, because, a lot of, the thing about consulting is that every time you have a new client, you basically have to immerse yourself in their world. Like, you just can't assume, oh, well, like, it's just like any other industry. So I try to really, and there's no way I could compare to, a trained person who's gone through years of schooling, but it's like, let me learn as much as I can, so we can start to talk as close as possible. So when I maybe bring an article to you, or I make an edit, it's really like you're not spending more time trying to fix what was created, because I had like a baseline understanding. And there were times, I remember there was something where it said BLS, and it wasn't bilateral stimulation. I'm like, oh, this is incorrect. And then I went and just changed it, and you were like, yep, this is right. So I felt really good about that.
Yeah, because you were like, I know the lingo, I know the stuff. Yeah, and that saves time for you and for the people that you're serving to have that knowledge. And I think something else in terms of like how websites look and EMDR intensives that strikes me is that because EMDR intensives are this relatively new thing, I think you want a website that also sends the message of like being modern, being clean, being like efficient, because that's kind of how we think about intensive. So I felt like you guys did a really good job of that, of making everything, the messaging felt very streamlined, like the media matched the message kind of,
Oh yeah, and I think I will say this: designers by nature are somewhat selfish. I'll say they, but we, we want to design things for us, like and for our peers, versus.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying.
So like
so somebody else, your peer would be like, "Ooh, that looks good."
Exactly. Yeah. Right? And over time, as we've matured, we start to realize it's not about us. Like the success of our clients matters more, because if our client is succeeding, that's saying that we've understood the challenge, we've brought our special sauce, and made it work. And but you can always see the DNA in everything that we're doing work-wise. So it's really fun, that balance. And to your point, it has to be, we're thinking about not just our client but the end users. So is it legible? That's the first thing I would say. Can you read it? Does it put you in a state to mentally to be ready to understand and process what you're reading? Because if you're coming with a problem, and this is the thing I didn't know, and I should have known before about therapists. I kind of assume I use therapists and shrink and psychologists interchangeably, and not really understanding the nuances. Right. So if someone, let's say, has they've been traumatized, or maybe they've been sexually abused, mentally, you're bringing that with you when you're looking for help. And if the website is not making it easier to identify with the solution, you may be potentially turning that person away from getting help. And so we really have to think about that, as creatives as well.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I think one thing you guys did really nicely in terms of, because I work with a lot of sexual abuse survivors, as you guys know, and you made the website feel like calming, I think, and very welcoming, but not in like a bright, overwhelming way, in a very like, this is a safe place. This is a place where you can get help. And, you made it very readable. Like there's plenty of content on there, but it's not like, you made it, your eye follows it nicely. So it just feels like a soothing place to be. And
I think it helped that you gave us a template in terms of like the aspiration that you were aiming for. And we try to work with that, because one of the things we were doing our research, I noticed, was that a lot of therapist websites, the color schemes are too drabby, like it kind of, and the imagery, it's like people looking depressed, and I'm just like, It's kind of,
the same like 10 images that everybody uses.
Right. So then what we're
people
thinking
looking
about
depressed, exactly.
right. But that's but subconsciously, it's like you don't want to be depressed. You want healing. So
you want hope.
You want hope. So
Yeah.
And you mentioned in the podcast before about you don't give hard specific like you will get these results, but
right.
You're going to be better off than when you came in, and it's going to be a process. So I think that was the understanding we had visually. It's like we're not promising you that your life is going to be amazing and you'll never be sad again,
right?
But you're going to have hope, and and there's a way to get to it. Right. So the imagery had to find that balance.
Yeah, and I love that, and I think that's totally true. And it is really funny if you go to a lot of therapist websites, you can tell the ones that were like, the template ones, because they have all the same pictures.
Same pictures.
They all look
and
you
could use, and there's lots of sites that you can get images for free from. But I think it's about being a little bit creative in terms of what you're looking for, and present with a presentation. So yeah, if you have questions, about that.
And I also think that like part of, and I think I kind of said this already, but if you're trying to sell a high value, a high cost service like intensives, your website needs to have like kind of a luxury feel.
Oh yeah.
And that's what I felt like I was investigating. It was like, I want to get those clients who are going to pay that money, but if my website looks like trash, why would they do that? Why would I attract those people?
Exactly. It's funny you say that, because I remember when I was buying a home a few years back, and I started to realize that the really successful, like I could tell how successful a realtor was by the car that was parked out of the model homes. And it was odd because, and so I'm just, well, I don't know if there was any correlation between how good they were as a realtor versus how nice their car was.
Right.
But I kind of said to myself, you know what? If they're driving like a beat up Corolla, maybe, like how effective are they? I don't know. So, but it definitely.
Well, your image matters. We're selling a service. Like a lot of therapists don't want to think about themselves as selling, but like if you're not selling something, you're not going to make any money. So sorry, you are selling something.
and selling, and I've had this problem for a long time. Like I think, we feel like selling somehow like maybe pollutes the purity of the thing that you're doing. Like it commercializes it. But I would say, and this is something it just kind of hit me recently, is that what I love about therapists, I feel that therapists are the last frontier of independent practitioners. Like I've grown up having like a childhood doctor, and I remember up until a few years ago, I always somehow would just have a private practitioner as my PCP, and now like you can't find them. Like they're all working for either a hospital or like
big group practice.
You got CVS offering. So it's just so
it's really me, true.
If practitioners have thriving businesses, that you get to offer that the quality that you've wanted to do. Because my wife, she's a nurse practitioner, she'll tell you that working for a big hospital, you're dealing with like the pressures of a bureaucracy of like it's about efficiency, and I would hate for that to happen to the therapy industry.
I would hate that as well. And like that's one of the reasons I loved working with you guys, is because I felt like you understood the value of being a small business owner. And because we're not, I really hope that does. I feel like for so many reasons it makes sense that therapists stay small or have small practices, because it's so highly confidential, right? The experience needs to feel like I'm going to a place where, maybe nobody will know that this place even exists, right? It needs to feel very private. And so it like makes sense that we stay small. And I hope that always stays the same. Like
No, I totally hear what you're saying, because even like yesterday, there's an article in the journal about Walmart was looking at mining patient data for the diabetes drugs, and I'm just like, imagine, what kind of world would it be if, you had, therapy practices as part of some big corporate umbrella where now it's like they understand like people's emotions and how to
and they're like manipulating that information. Who knows what they use it for? It's scary.
Exactly.
Yeah. And like people tell us things that they have literally never told anybody else in their entire lives and never will tell anybody else. And as therapists, that's such a privilege, but it's also like a responsibility.
It's a responsibility.
Yeah. And it's heavy because there's so many things that I know that I could never tell anybody, of course, but it's a heavy responsibility. And so there's so many reasons why I think therapists need to charge a hefty fee. That's one of them. And another one is so they can invest in services like you guys offer that are going to make them stand out. But, that's an investment, but it's a worthwhile investment. Like I've seen how my practice and my business coaching have taken off since I've worked with you guys. Like it's not an accident,
Well, thank you. And don't sell it so short too, because I think it's an investment. Yes, on our side as well, but you put a lot of investment in taking what you wanted seriously. Like you didn't phone in just just I just want A or B. Like you really, when we asked you for a sample copy, for example, you gave us copy.
Here you go.
Right. And so that I think helps us, really, I think amplify, because at the end of the day, like we're not alchemists. We can't take lead and turn it into gold.
Right.
So, we, like I said, we want to amplify, we want to, burnish it to really, but it really comes back to what you as, a client, are helping, giving the inputs. Good inputs equals good outputs.
Yeah, exactly. And a good working relationship.
Yeah.
And the other, I think to wrap up a little, I was just trying to think of like, just in terms of telling people what services you offer, the kinds of things that we've done together. So obviously web design, of course, and all the upkeep, like you guys make sure everything is working so I don't have to worry about it. Any updates, if I ever want something changed, you just do it.
Right.
Obviously
brand
you made
identity.
Brand identity. Yep.
Right.
And then creating all these social media deliverables that I can use.
Right.
Whether stories,
the email marketing, the email automation.
Automation.
That was actually a lot of fun.
Oh, good.
Because
I'm glad you did it. I did it.
It was one of those things like we had identified as an area to really like, to invest in.
Mm-hmm.
And then we kind of, had done it, but I think it was really like working. It was less about the technology as opposed to the mechanics of the campaign. So, like you had a really strong lead magnet. I think that's the lead magnet for, those who are wondering, it's like the freebie that you would offer, ebook, it could be a quiz, but you had a really strong lead magnet, gave it to us as a Google Doc. And I think what we were able to do was really turn that into something that was on brand.
It's so beautiful. I love it. My mom is very impressed by it, by the way. I want to tell you, she thinks it looks great.
And so having that, but it was more than just any of those one things. It was tying it all together. Yeah, so like everything that you have at FTP is part of a system. And I think that's really what we want people to know, is that marketing is a system, as opposed to, you might hear, go on social media or blog.
Right.
They all have a role to play, but sometimes if you focus on just one thing and then you stop and you move into the next thing, you won't get the benefits of that synergy working together.
Right.
So, and I think that's really where I think as an agency that we've gone from web designer or graphic designer into, like that creative technology space. So sticking with the beautiful visuals, but making sure that the messaging and the technology all work together to bring in and attract clients.
Right. And I think you guys really helped me with that, is like you said, like a system. And the podcast has actually been great with that, because all I have to do is come up with the podcast content and then everything flows from that. So that's a tip for all of you out there. Come up with the top level funnel as your funnel, and everything else goes from there.
I will say this though, the podcast was probably one of the most effective content tools for us as an agency, because you'll give us the audio, and then we would get the transcript, and we were able to turn the transcript into social media content, into blog content, which helps with SEO.
Right.
So it wasn't a case where like you have to like sit down and think of like a ton of things to write.
Right.
Just you talking was the content, and we just have the tools and the process to make it fit whatever platform you want to go onto.
Right, exactly. And I think like as therapists, a lot of us, what we're good at is talking about what we know about. So like, yeah, that was where that's what I do, but I don't want to do anything else. I want to outsource everything else.
Right. And so one thing we're doing now, is like the lesson that we learned with you with the podcast is I tell people, look, I'm going to give you some questions. It might be, SEO related, about your practice, but just give me a voice recording of you answering these questions.
Oh, good idea.
We'll take it from there. We'll take the audio and turn it into the copywritten, proofread text, make sure that it has the right keywords. It has, maybe it's ready for social media, because anyone, to your point, as an expert can talk all day long. Let's not make it hard for people to really.
That is such a good idea. That is such a good idea, because people get so overwhelmed when you say write something.
Exactly. Right.
Like,
write
no!
this 2,000 word article about, bilateral stimulation or the 8 phases. It's like, no, just tell me about the 8 phases.
Exactly. And, that's such a good idea.
If it's 5 minutes, if it's 15 minutes, it doesn't matter. Like, we will make it work. And the beautiful thing is that it is your voice.
Right.
And that is something with, I think, AI that more now than ever is going to matter, because with AI, it's just respinning the same information in different ways. Right. Whereas, as a practitioner, you have an opinion, you have an authority on particular topics. That is what will help you stand out, in this age of AI.
Exactly. Our voice is the thing that we really have that AI can't take from us.
Hopefully.
I know.
So,
Well, right before we stop, the last thing I want to ask is, how can people find you to find out more about what you do?
Sure. We are, online, of course. Eflat Inc. If you Google that, or it's eflatinc.com, that's our website. Mm-hmm. We have, therapist landing page. So I'll actually give you the link if you want to put in the show notes.
I will, please.
And that's a page that's really just dedicated to therapists.
Awesome.
Explains, how we help therapists, the types of services, and the next step that you could take if you have more questions.
Great.
And and I think what we're going to start doing is offering webinars, to therapists that are interested in anything marketing, whether it might be email marketing or just, websites, creating content.
That's a great idea.
And we'll take it from there.
That's a great idea. Well, and if you guys want to see a sample of their work, you can look at my websites and see what they look like, and they know how to find them. Well, so thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that you took the time to come on, and I hope you hear from some people as a result of this, because you guys do really great work, and you're great to work with. You're so easy to communicate with, and that's so helpful.
It's been a pleasure, just collaborating with you over these years, and I'm really impressed with everything that you're doing. So it's definitely a privilege to be on your podcast.
Thank you. All right, take care.